Good day, beautiful souls. Today's presentation is Awakening Freedom, a four-part guilt healing journey. If you watched the first presentation in regards to shame, there are four family of emotions: shame, guilt, embarrassment, and humiliation. Today marks the second mm, emotion, family emotion, which is guilt. So we'll be going over that. And today's agenda consists of me introduction in case you missed my introduction on the first presentation, a breathing technique which I consider 447, a list of the four families of emotions, understanding guilt, the guilt triggers and emotional patterns, breaking guilt cycles, and walking in freedom. So allow me to introduce myself. My name is Deidre. I have a background in behavioral health. I specialize in dialectical behavior therapy, cognitive behavior therapy, and holistic therapy. I also have a license in health and wellness. I help individuals 40 and over rediscover purpose, heal from the past, and create a balanced, fulfilling life. And with that being said, let's go into the 447. We're going to do those approximately 5 times. Let's begin. Breathe. You breathe in 4, hold 4, and release 7. Now, breathe in 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold 1, 2, 3, 4. Release 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Breathe in 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold 1, 2, 3, 4. Release 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Breathe in 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold 1, 2, 3, 4. Release 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Breathe in 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold 1, 2, 3, 4. Release 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Breathe in 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold 1, 2, 3, 4. Breathe out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Let's take a minute to ponder in that. It's all about being aware of your breath, being one with yourself, setting a mindful mindset. And with that being said, let's get into it. By the end of this 4-part guilt recovery series, you will understand the roots of guilt, which gain clarity on where your guilt patterns begin, childhood messages, culture pressure, relationship dynamics, and internalized expectations. You will be able to identify the differences between healthy versus toxic guilt. And with that, you will learn how to recognize when guilt is guiding you toward growth and when it is turning into self punishment, shame, or self attack. You will build guilt free boundaries, develop the confidence to say no, honor your needs, and stop carrying emotional weight that was never yours. You'll learn to rebuild self trust through compassion, and that is strengthen your ability to rely on yourself, keep your word to yourself, and break cycles of self betrayal. You will learn releasing internalized blame and emotional burdens. You will learn how to let go of guilt that belongs to past versions of you, to other people, or to situations outside your control. And last but not least, you will be able to practice freedom declarations and self forgiveness. And that consists of creating a new inner narrative rooted in worthiness, emotional freedom, and aligned decision making. Part one: understanding guilt, the story we carry. And this entails what guilt truly is, healthy versus toxic guilt, where guilt comes from, whether it's childhood, culture, or relationships, and how guilt differs from shame. And we'll have some reflection questions to ponder on. What guilt truly is? Guilt is an emotional signal that tells us we've gone against our own values, boundaries, or intentions. It isn't meant to punish us, it's meant to guide us. Healthy guilt helps us reflect, take responsibility, and repair what may have been harmed. But when guilt becomes excessive or distorted, it turns into self blame, shame, and emotional heaviness. That keeps us stuck in cycles of regret. Guilt says, I made a mistake. It does not say, I am the mistake. True understanding of guilt allows us to acknowledge our choices without attacking our character. It invites honesty, growth, accountability, and healing, not self condemnation. Healthy guilt versus toxic guilt. Healthy guilt is a constructive internal signal. It helps you recognize when your actions don't align with your values. It guides reflection, accountability, and personal growth. Healthy guilt says, I can make this right. It motivates repair without attacking your worth. Whereas toxic guilt, however, is distorted and overwhelming. It lingers even after you've apologized, changed, or grown. It makes you feel responsible for things outside of your control and convinces you that you must constantly earn forgiveness. Toxic guilt says something is wrong with me and keeps you stuck in shame, self blame, and emotional exhaustion. With understanding the difference, it allows you to respond to your mistakes with compassion instead of punishment, choosing healing, not self condemnation. Where does guilt come from? Does it come from your childhood? Does it come from the culture born into? Or does it come from past, present relationships? Guilt often begins long before we recognize it. And someone once said that there are two types of people in the world. There are guilt catchers and guilt throwers. And with that being said, guilt in childhood can form when we are punished harshly, expected to be perfect, or made responsible for the emotions of adults. When a child learns if something goes wrong, it must be my fault. They carry that belief into adulthood. For example, uh, a mother and father within the household getting a divorce, children automatically think it's their fault, but it's not. That means they're carrying the emotions of adults. They have to be assured that it's not their fault. And if they're not assured, or if they don't deal with that type of trauma, then it carries on to adulthood. And then you have something way more far than guilt. You have the shame and embarrassment and humiliation carrying on your shoulders. And and with cultural and family expectations also shapes guilt. The messages like don't disappoint anyone, or be strong, or put others first teach us that our value is tied to meeting standards that may be unrealistic or impossible. This creates guilt whenever we prioritize our own needs. And in relationships, guilt grows when boundaries are ignored. You have to let an individual know how he or she is making you feel. You have to make it right then and there, make the correction right then and there. Because if not, you'll have shame, guilt, humiliation, and embarrassment. And then that can turn into anger. Because guilt grows, boundaries are ignored. Like I said, emotional manipulation occurs, or we feel pressure to keep the peace. Over time, we learn to apologize for simply existing, needing rest, or wanting something different. Guilt doesn't appear out of nowhere. It's often taught, modeled, or reinforced. Understanding its roots helps you break free from old patterns and choose self compassion over self blame. Let's take the word self compassion. That was learned in the shame series just before this one. Self compassion is so important to your mental health, your mental, physical, and emotional well being. You have to care for yourself, starting with self compassion. How does guilt differ from shame? Guilt and shame are often confused, but they are very different emotional experiences. For example, guilt focuses on a behavior, something you did or didn't do. It says, I made a mistake. Guilt can lead to accountability, growth, and repairing harm because it centers on actions that can be changed. Whereas shame, however, targets the self. It says, I am the mistake. Instead of encouraging correction, shame creates hiding, silence, self criticism, and the belief that you are unworthy. Shame attacks identity, while guilt addresses choices. Guilt motivates responsibility, whereas shame fuels rejection. Understanding this difference helps you respond to your mistakes with compassion and allows you to heal without tearing yourself down. Here are some reflection questions that you can ponder on in your spare time. What situations trigger guilt in me most often and why? When did I first learn to feel responsible for others' emotions or needs? Is the guilt I'm carrying based on a current choice or an old pattern from childhood? Am I feeling guilty because I've done something wrong or because someone else expects more than I can give? What part of my life do I apologize for the most and why? How do I speak to myself when I feel guilty, with compassion or criticism? What would change in my life if I allowed myself to release guilt I no longer deserve to carry? When was the last time I gave myself grace instead of punishment? The voice do I hear when I feel guilt? Mine or someone from my past? How can I turn this moment of guilt into an opportunity for healing rather than self blame? And with these self reflection questions, you can ask yourself these questions to get yourself out of guilt. So, and not to carry the shame and guilt and embarrassment and humiliation. And with that being said, part two, guilt triggers and emotional patterns, the weight we hold. We're going to go over common guilt triggers, which is mistakes, unmet expectations, boundaries, and saying no. How guilt shows up in a behavior, how guilt shapes relationships, and we have examples and breakdowns of those, and we have a reflection task included in this part too. Mistakes, what it is, feeling guilty for a decision or actions that didn't turn out well. Why it triggers guilt? Because we believe we should have known better. And an example with that is you snapped at a loved one during stress. Later, you replay it and feel like you failed them. Two, unmet expectations. What it is. What it is, guilt from not meeting your own standards, not meeting your own standards, or what you think others may expect. Why it triggers guilt? Because perfectionism, people pleasing, or a childhood conditioning. An example with that is you plan to start a diet, let's say on Monday, but didn't. You shame yourself for lacking discipline. 3, boundaries. This is my favorite. You tell a person that someone asks you for something, an individual will ask you for something. You say yes, but you really want to say no. You have to set boundaries in everything that you do in your day-to-day life. And then what is it? What is it? It's feeling bad for protecting your time, energy, or emotional space. And why it triggers guilt. Because you were taught that saying no means you're selfish or difficult. And an example of that is you decline a last minute request. And then you feel responsible for someone else's disappointment. You have to come first. It protects your mental, physical, and emotional well-being. 4, saying no. What is it? It's guilt for refusing requests, favors, or emotional labor. Why it triggers guilt? Because you feel obligated to keep others comfortable. And an example for that is, for saying no, is a friend wants to talk while you're exhausted. You say no, then you worry you're letting them down. Again, you have to come first. You have to protect your mental, physical, and emotional well-being. You have to protect your peace at all cost. Sometimes you may not feel like uh talking or having company over. You have to say what you feel, and if it's no, then it's no, and don't have no regrets. Next here, we're going to have reflection task, which task number 1, list 5 guilt triggers and the story you tell yourself. And then rewrite each story with truth and compassion. Self-compassion is so important to our day-to-day living, because your mind, body, and spirit has to be in sync with each other in order to be peaceful. You can take a few minutes to write those 5 guilt triggers down and rewrite each story in your time. Part 3, breaking guilt cycles, releasing what isn't yours. Guilt cycles, overgiving, over apologizing, and then self punishment. And then we have reframing guilt with compassion and how to release guilt that doesn't belong to you. And then you have guided self-forgiveness activity. And let's dig into this. With guilt cycles, overgiving, over apologizing, and self-punishment. Guilt often creates repetitive behavior, loops that keep us trapped in emotional exhaustion and self-betrayal. These cycles form when we believe we must earn forgiveness, acceptance, or peace instead of resolving the root emotion. Guilt pushes us into patterns that drain our energy and damage our sense of worth. Let's take number 1, for example. Overgiving. If I do enough, I'll feel better. When guilt takes the wheel, we start giving beyond our capacity, our time, energy, money, emotional labor. We over texting ourselves, hoping it will silence the discomfort inside. But overgiving never truly heals guilt. It simply teaches us to betray our own needs to maintain relationships and or avoid conflict. And 2, over apologizing. Everything must be my fault. Constant apologizing becomes a reflex when guilt convinces us that we are responsible for everyone else's emotions. Instead of healthy accountability, we shrink ourselves, apologize for existing, and take the blame to keep the peace. This reinforces the harmful belief that our worth depends on being agreeable, perfect, or mistake free. And number three, self punishment says, I deserve to suffer for what I did. Guilt can turn inward, becoming harsh self criticism, shame spirals, or emotional withdrawal. We punish ourselves through negative self talk, isolating or depriving ourselves of joy because we believe we must pay for mistakes. This cycle keeps us stuck in the past and blocks healing, growth, and here's that word again, self compassion. Reframing guilt with compassion. Guilt doesn't have to be a life sentence, it can become a doorway to self understanding and self healing when we view it through a compassionate lens. Instead of treating guilt as proof that something is wrong with us, compassion allows us to see guilt as information, not identity. It becomes a signal that guides us toward alignment, repair, and growth. Compassion reframes guilt from an emotional burden into an opportunity to reconnect with our values. Rather than attacking ourselves, we learn to approach our mistakes with honesty, gentleness, and responsibility. This shift softens blame, reduces shame, and creates space for healthier choices in the future. When we practice compassion, we stop punishing ourselves and start understanding ourselves. We acknowledge the impact of our actions without collapsing into self-criticism. And that's where self-compassion come in at. You want to be kind to yourself. Speak kindly to yourself with positive self-talk, positive reassurance, being confident in yourself and your ability. Reframing guilt with compassion means asking, what is this emotion trying to teach me? Instead of, what's wrong with me for feeling this? Be aware of your emotions. Emotions are neutral. It's what description you put place on the emotion that causes different types of dilemmas or situations or reactions. Ultimately, compassion helps transform guilt into clarity, accountability, and self-forgiveness, allowing us to move forward with wisdom rather than self-judgment. And that's where empathy comes in at. You have to be non-judgmental to yourself, compassionate, understanding of your flaws and your triggers and your vulnerability. Now, how to release guilt that doesn't belong to you. Many people carry guilt that was never theirs to hold. Guilt inherited from other people's expectations, childhood roles, relationship dynamics, or emotional responsibilities placed on them unfairly. This particular guilt feels heavy because it comes from trying to manage other people's feelings, reactions, or mistakes. Releasing it requires recognizing that you are not responsible for the emotions or behaviors of others. That goes with setting boundaries. Saying no, saying no to individuals and not feeling guilty about it. Letting go begins with identifying where the guilt originated. Was it a parent you tried to protect? A partner you tried to keep happy? A role you were forced to step into? Once you acknowledge that the burden came from someone else's needs or wounds, you can separate their story from your truth. Releasing misplaced guilt means giving yourself permission to stop over functioning, stop fixing, and stop absorbing what was never yours. It involves setting boundaries, speaking honestly, and allowing others to carry their own emotional weight. Through self awareness and compassion and self compassion, you reclaim your energy and return responsibility to where it belongs. Ultimately, freeing yourself from borrowed guilt opens space for self respect, emotional freedom, and healthier relationships. You are allowed to let go. You have to lovingly release individuals who are energy vampires or emotion vampires, who zap you from your emotions or put too much on you or make you feel guilty. Because remember, there's two types of individuals in this world: guilt catchers and guilt throwers. And with that being said, it's not because you don't care when you set your boundaries or you freeing yourself from borrowed guilt, but because it was never yours to hold. Guided self-forgiveness activities. Self-forgiveness is the process of releasing the self-blame, shame, and inner criticism that keep you tied to past mistakes. This guided activity helps you move from judgment to understanding, from punishment to healing. Instead of replaying what went wrong, you learn to honor the lesson, acknowledge your humanity, and offer yourself the compassion you've needed. In this activity, you are invited to pause, breathe, and gently reflect on a moment where you've been hard on yourself. Through intentional prompts, you'll identify the emotion beneath the guilt, name what you needed at the time, and recognize the way you've grown since then. This practice shifts the focus from "I should have known better" to "I did the best I could with what I knew then." As you move through the exercise with the breathing techniques that you learned in the beginning, you will practice releasing the weight you've been carrying and replacing it with acceptance and understanding. Guided self forgiveness helps soften your inner voice, rebuild trust with yourself, and create a foundation for healthier choices going forward. The goal of this activity is not to erase the past, but to free you from being defined by it, allowing you to step into healing with clarity, compassion, and renewed self-worth. Part 4, walking in freedom, choosing self-compassion over self-blame. And we're going to go over healthy accountability versus self-attack, build guilt-free boundaries, rebuilding self-trust, and go over freedom declarations. Healthy accountability versus self attack. Healthy accountability is taking responsibility for your actions without destroying your sense of worth. It sounds like I made a mistake and I can correct it. That's what healthy accountability. And self attack, on the other hand, turns a behavior into a personal flaw, which causes shame and guilt, embarrassment and humiliation. It says, I am the mistake. This shift is crucial in guilt recovery. You learn to correct yourself with compassion, not criticism. Building guilt free boundaries. Guilt free boundaries honor your energy, time, and emotional well being without apologizing for protecting yourself. They come from the belief that you deserve safety and peace. This brings up the saying, I'm going to protect my peace at all costs, and that's what you have to do. You have to protect your peace at all costs, because your mind, body, and spirit has to be in sync with each other. If any one of those three are out of sync, you'll be all over the place. You have chaos, turmoil, you'll be in shame, guilt, humiliation, and embarrassment because you are not protecting your peace. You have to have self-compassion, self-awareness, self-assurance, self-confidence, and be emotional intelligent. I want to throw that in there. So setting boundaries isn't rejection, it's clarity. When guilt isn't driving your decisions, you stop abandoning yourself to keep others comfortable. And we don't want that, because you're not protecting your peace if you're doing that. Or having self-compassion or being kind to yourself. You ignoring your feelings or what you're feeling to please someone else. Rebuilding self-trust, which is another important aspect of self-compassion, goes under there. With self-trust is rebuilt through small consistent acts that show you're on your own side again. You're looking out for yourself, basically. It grows every time you keep a promise to yourself. Listen to your intuition or choose alignment over approval. Over time, trust becomes the foundation that makes guilt less powerful and self-betrayal less tempting. Be true to yourself. Know your triggers. Know your vulnerability. Tell your story. But remember, everyone doesn't isn't entitled to knowing your vulnerabilities, because you have some individuals that will use your vulnerability or your triggers against you for the better of them, for manipulation purposes. They want to keep you in shame, guilt, humiliation, and embarrassment. Freedom declarations. Freedom declarations are bold statements that break old guilt-based identities and create new mental pathways. And that's what we want to do. We want to be healthy mentally, physically, and emotionally. Our cup should run it over with self-love, self-care, self-compassion. They reaffirm your right to release shame, step into worthiness, and choose a healthier narrative. For example, I release what is not mine to carry. I am allowed to change, heal, and grow. My worth is not up for negotiation. That's that part where it says I'm going to protect my peace at all costs. Because again, you have to have your mind, your mental, physical, and emotional well-being intact, whereas you have to have your mind, body, and spirit intact to avoid chaos, stress, high blood pressure. With that being said, thank you for being here. Your healing and your transformation matters. My email address, info@fullforcewellnesscoaching.com. My number is 1-877-51-FORCE. Website, www.fullforcewellnesscoaching.com. And remember, it's your future. Be happy, be healthy.